Hi, and welcome back to the Estate First Lawyers series on A Will Is Not Enough. And now we're looking at the next insight, and that is, how do we get our wealth from ourselves to our loved ones and not have it go L-shaped before it reaches them? And this is a huge problem that we're having in estate planning in this current generation. A lot of inheritances are not reaching the beneficiaries you wanted it to go to. In fact, it has been estimated that up to 70% of our wealth will not reach 2 generations down. So in the example where you have children and then grandchildren, it's not going to reach grandchildren level. So how do we solve this problem? Well, in estate planning, most things can be prevented, and prevention is certainly better than cure because you're not around after you die to fix it, which means that if you put the right plan in place now, then you are much more likely to have everything go smoothly than if you fail to plan. All right, so what am I talking about? What scenarios am I talking about that are the big risks? Well, the first one is the blended family risk. So there's Brady Bunch families now, okay? So we not only have a spouse, we have now, it's a second spouse, we have our own children and possibly children of that second spouse. So we might say, well, that's fine. What we're going to do is we're going to do a will together where we agree we leave it all to each other, but then when the last of us die, we are going to leave half to my children and half to your children. So my child will get 50% when you die last, and I promise to give 50% to your child if I die last. Now, what is happening more often than you'd like to think is that you pass away and your spouse lives on for another 20 years, loses touch with your children, and the inheritance goes L-shaped because she changes her will or he changes his will after you pass away, because it's a free world and you can change your will anytime you want unless you have inheritance agreements in place. Changes the will and leaves it all to their child, and your child misses out. That is the inheritance effectively going L-shaped. And it can happen just because life happens. Your spouse is not the mother or father of your child and loses touch with your child after you die, and it's years later they're living with their child or have a relationship with their child, and it's just natural that it happens that way. And these things can be avoided with the right plan in place and possibly an inheritance agreement or some other capital preserved agreement in the will or an agreement outside the will that can start to govern how much can go to this child if you die first. Now, it can also happen in single families. And the scenario is that you make a will and you leave everything, let's say it was me, I leave everything to my husband and then to my 2 children, and then I pass away first, and my husband, in this example, gets repartnered, and my wealth goes L-shaped to the new partner. And my children miss out, because if my husband then, for example, dies first in this relationship, and this lady here has children with that relationship or of her own, she's very likely to leave it to her own children and not to mine. And this is happening quite frequently. And it's because a simple will cannot govern what happens when I die and my husband has the money. But with agreements and with certain entities in place in the will, we can explore with you options of how to prevent the L-shaped inheritance happening. So the insight is your estate plan should not only be comprehensive and financially clever, and we've talked about that in Insight 1 and 2, so have a look at those videos if you haven't already, but it should also be designed to avoid the L-shaped inheritance happening to you so that your ultimate goal of who gets your wealth is achieved.